Hi there, it's Cherylea from Anatomy for the People. In this video, I'm going to take you through the basics of the anatomy of the kidney. But before I start drawing, let's have a look at the 7 main functions of the kidneys. Firstly, the kidneys are able to balance the acids and bases within our bodies. Secondly, we have the kidneys being able to regulate the water balance in our body. Thirdly, the kidneys are able to maintain electrolyte balance. They have the ability to remove toxins and waste products from our blood. They're able to control our blood pressure. They produce a hormone called erythropoietin, which is really important in the generation of new red blood cells. And lastly, the kidneys are really important in activating vitamin D. Okay, so now I'm going to draw a basic kidney. So here is my basic diagram of a kidney. So the outermost layer of the kidney, which we can see here, is called the fibrous or the renal capsule. So this is a dense outermost layer which separates it from surrounding organs and protects deeper, more delicate tissues internally. So immediately below or deep to that capsule layer, we have this layer in here. And this is called the renal cortex. So all of this between here and here. So I'll just do a squiggly line. So that is the renal cortex. And so what you find within the renal cortex are the nephrons, and the nephrons are the functional unit of the kidney, and they're the functional units that are responsible for the majority of the functions that I've listed here. So deep to the renal cortex, you will have this next layer here, and this is the renal medulla. And so the renal medulla consists of 2 different types of tissue. You have these areas in here, which are called the renal columns, and then these areas here, which are called the renal pyramids. So all of this here, as I said, is the renal medulla, consisting of pyramids or renal pyramids and of renal columns. So the renal column tissue is virtually the same as the cortical tissue. However, we don't find the bulk of nephrons within there. The pyramids are going to contain parts of the nephron, so those functional units of the kidney. It's going to contain part of the tubules of that, but it's mainly going to consist of collecting ducts. And the collecting ducts, which come directly from the nephrons, actually drain away the urine that has been produced by the nephrons. And so the flow would be towards this part here. So these would be kind of your drainage units. So I just do a little arrow of the direction of the flow of the urine. So as the urine flows towards the peak of that pyramid, see it's this triangular shape, it's going to get to a point where it's actually going to leave and then move into these drainage parts here. So when it gets to the tip of that pyramid, there are small holes which allow the urine to pass through, and that would be the renal papilla. So at the tip of the pyramids, let's do the same color. And if we did a cross section across here, you would see all of these little holes in here called the renal papilla. So the urine then passes through there and then drains into these drainage ports. So the small ones that directly connect to the pyramids are called the minor calyces or singular minor calyx. So I'm just going to put a circle here, and these would be your minor calyces. little dot there, dot there. So I'll just do the little blue dot as minor calyx, or minor calyces, plural. So this is where you're going to have urine draining in so it can eventually leave the body. So you can see that we have these small minor calyces draining into these larger parts of that collecting port. And so then these would be termed the major calyces or the major calyx. So I'll do a little pink dot here, here, didn't really do one here. And then I'll do my pink dot down here. Then we have our major calyx. Okay, so then all of our major calyces will then drain into this larger part here. And so this larger part is called the renal pelvis. And so then the renal pelvis is going to collect all of that urine from all of the major calyces, and then that urine will then pass down into the ureter. So then the ureter will then lead down to the bladder, where you have temporary storage of urine until you're able to pass it at a location of your choice. Okay, so some other things that I didn't mention is there is a small space we can see in here, here. So you can see we have kidney tissue that's kind of engulfing those little minor and major calyces, but then you still have a tiny bit of space where there's actually no kidney tissue. And so that's called the renal sinus. And what you find within the renal sinus is fatty tissue. You'll also find some lymph nodes in there. You'll also have kind of some nerves and traversing through there. But you have this fat that sits in there. So it's really important to have fat in this area because it actually means that this drainage part of the kidney, so the minor and the major calyces, kind of propped up in position. So they're not sagging and they're not bending. Like, you know, if you kink a hose, the water, you know, gets blocked and goes in the opposite direction. So we will need to make sure that these are nice, popped open and kind of supported in that area. And so they're supported by that fat in the renal sinus. So obviously this is a very, quite a simple picture because we're not including the blood vessels. So essentially how the blood gets into the kidney will be via the renal artery. And the renal artery comes directly from the abdominal aorta, which is that main kind of distribution artery within our abdomen. So we have fresh oxygenated blood being pumped into the kidneys that goes there to be filtered. And then once the kidney is done with it, the blood is going to then leave as deoxygenated blood, but filtered blood via the renal vein. And the renal vein will then drain into the inferior vena cava, which will then go back towards the heart. Okay, so that's it in terms of the anatomy of the kidney. It's quite straightforward, especially when you're not including the blood vessels. But if we're talking about structure itself, it's it's really not that complex. When we move down to the functional unit, so the microscopy, and we talk about the function of the nephron, that's where we get a lot of that complexity. And I will cover that in another video. But essentially, this is the basic anatomy of the kidney, and I hope that you've enjoyed that. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.